to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports. It is a Thursday evening. The Fan Forum is back, and we are joined by the lads. It's been a long time since I've seen, and we spoke all been on the camera at the same time. Many things have happened. The Sharks have had a woeful URC season since then. The Boks are officially the best team in the world. What else is happening? The Lions are going to win the Currie Cup. Sash Zulu is the second coming. It's been a busy few months since we've all got back together. But as you can see, I am joined by Currie, Dan, and Ruudz at the bottom there. Gentlemen, how are we all? How are we feeling?
Very positive for this week. Cannot take anything but positivity into this test. Secretly nervous, but not telling any of the All Blacks fans that.
No. Yeah, I think to be fair, I think a lot of people are feeling a bit like that. You know, all the chat about us being so good at the moment, and all the depth, and everyone's talking us up, and Razor's talking about how Rassie's the benchmark and he's so awesome, and it's so prime for us to then just not rock up on Saturday and then all the sort of the rhetoric will change. But basically, coming up in the show, we're going to be talking about this weekend. We're going to be going through the teams. We're going to be talking about both games because we've got two Rugby Championship games in obviously South Africa versus New Zealand, the big one, as well as Argentina versus Australia. A bit of a late one, depending where you are in the world. We've also got some Currie Cup. We'll have a bit of check-in over there because we have to do a check-in when the Lions are doing well. I've got to enjoy my season before the URC and stuff starts. So we will do a bit of a check-in there. And at the end, we're going to give our score predictions and sort of see where everyone is and how everybody's feeling. So before we look at the team and stuff like that, Ruudz, I'm going to throw it to you first up. 2 wins against Australia, 2 pretty comfortable victories, a Springboks side that's rotating, trying to play attacking rugby. Things are definitely progressing. Life's been pretty good as a Bok fan. How are you feeling just generally as a Bok fan, and what's the feeling for this weekend?
I think, considering our record against New Zealand coming off the final last year, it was pretty close, obviously, but I think there's a sense of nervous excitement within me. There's obviously confidence that the Boks are actually a little bit more evolved than they were in that final last year, bringing on board the likes of Tony Brown. I think the Springboks are in a really good place. For the All Blacks, the thing for me where the nervous excitement comes in is I think it wasn't since 2009 we haven't been able to go three games on the trot against New Zealand. So they'll be coming out firing. All the talk about altitude, Ellis Park, iconic stadium, they're going to come out guns blazing. They've got a new coach. They've got a point to prove, and they've picked actually a very good side. And on paper, are in terms of caps, a little bit more experienced than the Boks. But then again, the confidence side of things is Rassie's always cooking up something special. And we're evolving to the next World Cup, but this is a major test for the year. The Irish were big. But I think New Zealand is going to be the real test, and it's back-to-back weekends. So nervous excitement, but confident at the same time.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of Chef Rassie and he's been cooking up a lot so far. Carl, you're a bit of a neutral in terms of not being a Bok fan. So I suppose we kind of judge about how confident we are. As a neutral or as somebody who plays against the Boks, when you look at the Springbok side, what is the sort of your initial thoughts about it?
This is probably one of my favorite Springbok sides, or rather this kind of era of Springbok rugby, because for me, certainly when I was growing up in South Africa, the whole thing about the Springboks was, you could only play rugby if you were big. And you look at the backline, it's not a big backline, but goddamn, are they talented. And there, your back three. Okay, Fussy, yes, there's an argument for him, but Colby and Arendse are probably the 2 best wingers in the world. And they're tiny, but they do things that is far. They punch so far above their weight that you don't even notice. So yeah, I really like this new look team, or rather not totally a new look team, but I like the changes that have been made in adding some youth to it rather.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting sort of balance that we have to have because, and I think I continue to grapple with this whole idea of previously, because of so many different reasons, that World Cup cycle 2019 to 2023 was purely World Cup based, or British and Irish Lions, then World Cup based, because we didn't have that 1 year of rugby, then the British and Irish Lions. This is a very different World Cup cycle because we've got 3 genuine years of just straightforward incoming series, Rugby Championship, outgoing series, incoming series, Rugby Championship, outgoing series. Even that All Blacks tour, for example, I don't think is going to happen until after the next World Cup potentially. So Dan, we are seeing youth coming into it. We're obviously also not binning a lot of the old guard. Kobus Reinach starting on Saturday, I think probably the perfect example of the fact that just because, you are 30 plus, 32, 34 even, you're not being binned yet. And Rusty's very much saying, prove to me that you can still play at this level, because, we saw Deon Fourie last year become the oldest Springbok to debut ever, play a massive role in the World Cup final. And so there's no need to sort of bin all the players. So how much have you enjoyed being able to see, first, obviously the youngsters, your Sashas, your Fassies, your Albert Lowe's, the likes of those, but as well as still giving other sort of older players a chance and having that kind of hybrid approach of the experience next to the youth.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see which players Rassie has, binned. For example, Trevor essentially is now, it seems like he's played his last game in a Bok jersey. Even obviously Deon Fourie also out of the picture now. The likes of Dwayne Vermeulen just, are still in a Springbok jersey, but now on the training side of things on the side of the pitch. But I do find it interesting, particularly now with this lock crisis, and we spoke about it earlier this week, but that Marvin Orie hasn't been brought back. And I personally think that was really, really sad, just because I think he had an outstanding season in the Bok jersey, and I think he would slot right in and be able to help. I guess, Rassie has taken the approach of blooding these players. He's throwing, Ruang Nokia, who wasn't even in the initial squad, just straight kind of to the Wolves. Sasha Ngomazulu hadn't played a test match for the Springboks before this year and is now starting against the All Blacks, in the biggest game of the year, essentially. So it's been interesting to see which players he picks and chooses to take on their responsibility. And then you have someone like Apelele Fassi, who's just demanded that. The same goes for Sasha, right? Given the opportunity, and now they're there, whereas you've seen one or two others, maybe you and your Lions boys, the Hendrikse and Mona van der Berg, who haven't been able to take their chances.
Yeah, I think that's been interesting. And I think we really are seeing form being rewarded. And, Ben Jason Dixon being sort of one of the key examples of that. Somebody who's been brought in. He's really had, he's not a young, I think he's about 26, 27 years old. So he's not old, but he's been around the block. And only recently come through really at the Stormers, become a key player, now made the progression. And he's been rewarded with a start on Saturday. Now, yes, it is a start that has kind of been necessitated because of a bit of a lock crisis. Peter Steph obviously shifting into that second row, but the players who have stood up have been rewarded. Jan-Hendrik Wessels, to give him his due, had never actually played in the URC or Champions Cup at Lucet for the Bulls. Gets an opportunity against Portugal, scores a try, has a half-decent game, gets an opportunity against Australia, has another pretty decent game, and he hasn't even been released to play Currie Cup this weekend. Stephen Kitsoff has. They've said to Kitsoff, you go get some game time, but if somebody goes down on Saturday, we can actually back Jan Hendrik basically. So it's a big backing to give to some of these players. Sasha, for example, as well. They're giving him the keys. It's one thing giving him 2 starts against Australia. It's a whole other thing to then say, right, well, you coped, therefore, start against the second best team in the world. Ruudz, let's talk about Sasha. It's difficult to get too far ahead of ourselves, isn't it? You're talking about a player who's been a bit of a prodigy throughout the years, and now the more we see of him, the more there's old footage of him coming up saying speeches when he was 12 years old and stuff like that. And if you've ever met him in person, and Dan interviewed him and I've interviewed him, and he's just the most down to earth, proper professional guy. It's ridiculous to think how young he is. So it's hard not to get too excited about him. But what's the threshold? Are we talking about potentially in 4 or 5 years' time us having potentially one of the best players in the world?
Yeah, definitely. So he's been earmarked and been taken note of a long time ago. He's come through the systems. The interesting part is he's been part of the Springbok setup. I know when the A team were playing, he was training against the Boks. Rassie has high regard for him, and I think earlier in the week, one of the the reporters at the media conference was asking, is it not perhaps an opportunity for more experience to be on the field? And Rassie blatantly came out and said it'd be stupid not to put Sasha in this position because he backs him 100%. And that's the thing with Rassie too. I think if he backs you 100%. And he's got all the skill sets in the world. He's got the size. He's a very good defender. I don't think too many people take note of that. But he's just got everything at his feet. It's up to him now to grab it. And I think for the most part, he's just shown that he is cool, calm, and collective under the pressure. But then again, the All Blacks test at Ellis Park is going to be a big test for him. But taking over from Handré Pollard, I think he's definitely the guy moving forward. He's got all the skill sets needed to become a superstar. I just also don't want us to get carried away too soon. I think we're gonna blend him in terms of putting him in the tier one against the tier one teams and give him that good couple of minutes and back him. And we probably will see the likes of Handré Pollard come on in the last 10, 15 minutes.
He's going to have that performance where he needs the first half replacement like Money did. Like that's going to happen. And we need to everyone just needs to not panic when it happens.
For sure. I think, and then that just begs the question, I guess, for somebody like Mani Libbok, where is he going to be second in line to Sasha now? So he's jumped the queue and he's got many more years being such a young fly-off. But it's very exciting to see Rassie back a young fly half and not stick to the same old. We're into a new era. We're evolving, like I said, under Tony Brown. Super excited for Saturday. I think Sasha is going to do some magic, brother.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like the fact, especially the backing that we need to give him when he does have that game, because he has made mistakes so far already. It's not been all smooth sailing. I mean, he's looked incredible at times, but he's also made some mistakes. He's always going to come at a 22-year-old. Dan, I mean, Ruudz talks about the Rassie backing. I mean, every single time he nails a kick, there seems to be the camera panning to Rassie Erasmus, who's sitting next to Tony Brown, and there's just laughs and smiles. I mean, it's literally like what it's like two parents watching on. It's like they're looking at this player, and I think they're just looking at like the project Sasha it seems to be such a big part of this coaching staff. How important do you think he is as a player in terms of our transition into a more attacking team, in terms of being that player who's not maybe necessarily the all-out attack player that Mani Libbok is, not the necessarily just yet the general that Handré Pollard necessarily is, but a bit of a blend of the two in terms of having both sets of skill sets.
Yeah, I think we shouldn't get in a way too ahead of ourselves, because this is a little bit reminiscent of the Springboks or a new type of Springboks that we saw because Mani Libbok was given the keys, right? And he was the one tasked with, being the creative fly-off, and it was allowed to do that. The first time we've really seen someone as creative as Mani Libbok, given the 10 jersey and the Springbok shirt. All of a sudden, we start coming up in very tight games in knockout rugby, and we went straight back to the safety of what we wanted, and that was kick for poles, put Handré on, and win our scrums. So when the going got tough, we still actually did resort back to that. So it'll be interesting to see in these big important games, let's say it is a game that defines the Rugby Championship. Are we going to then stick to our guts? And is Sasha the person that's going to be trusted in going and doing that? Or if he's injured, does Mani come back into the fold? It'll be interesting to see how that creativity is found, not just through who the fly-off is. But for now, obviously, it's incredibly exciting. He's the new golden child who is, the face of the Tony Brown era. And I mean, I'd love to see us, at least give it a crack. If it doesn't work after a year, you can relook at it. Even 2 years, you can relook at it and then prepare for a World Cup cycle. But they're clearly going, listen, we need to continually evolve. This is the key to doing that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, as I said, it'll be really interesting to try and see how long you sort of continue with this. And I think the main thing is obviously not to move away from your core strengths, like the scrum and having a very good pack. And we're seeing a lot of innovation in like the lions and stuff. I mean, Carl, you speak about this being, your favorite Springbok side. I think the hallmark of the Springbok side has been the versatility, not just of the game plan, but the players, of kind of everything. I mean, you look at this backline, for example, and every single player in the starting, 15 basically, even in the pack, there's very few players that only play one position. You look at the backline and you've got a Sasha who covers 10, 12, 15. Jesse Creel who can cover 13, 14. You've got a Apele Fassi 15, 14. Damon Delaney can cover 12, 13. Curtly Aronson can cover 11, 14, 15. Cheslin basically covers everything from prop to full back apparently at the moment. How much do you think that adds to the excitement? The fact that there is this versatility and these players can move around, and so you can almost sort of afford the different type of bench plays for stuff, but not just, for example, the different type of bench splits, but even, for example, having a Andre Paul who's traditionally just a fly half, where traditionally, you kind of always had to have a Damien Willems for the likes on the bench. Now, because Sasha starts, he is that kind of utility player. But, how much does this give the Boks the kind of the license it needs to be able to change things whenever needed, because you've got players who can just slot in anywhere? I mean, Pierre-Steph du Toit has started this year at 4, 5, and 7, for example.
If the nice thing about your backline is you don't have to change a thing and everything can change. It's the fact that you can set up a line, attacking line, and then literally in the next move, all your players are out of position, but in a familiar position. Not many teams have that, where they're just like, okay, well, I'm here now, so play this. And knowing that and having a lot of experience in all of those positions is something really nice to have. So obviously some of these players haven't played that much together, but in that kind of camp where you're training all the time together, you're constantly interacting with each other, it becomes less of an issue because it's more trust than anything. Like if you go into a rugby camp or training, you may practice 8, 9 moves. How many do you use on the pitch? Probably 2. Like it never happens. It's far more about play off what's going on.
Yeah, that's an interesting. It's an interesting point, especially that adaptability and people understanding. I also think is in terms of rugby IQ. I think they must be building so much rugby IQ in a Sasha understanding how to play 12. So what is in the Boks system? What is his role when he plays 12? What's his role when he plays 15? And how much understanding that must give everybody else to understand this is my role, this is what they're doing, and so I reckon the rugby IQ must be being built into these players with the versatility. I mean, Jasper Wiese, for example, has been packing out lock in training this week. Something he played years back at Chile a couple of times, but it must be such an interesting thing for them to understand so holistically this game plan, so they can sort of slot in sort of everywhere. Now we're just going to go to some of the comments, and if you haven't commented and you are watching, first of all, please do smash a like on the video and drop your comments in over there. And earlier, we had a couple of comments, and Paul was saying the best team in the world, Springbok, go Bokke. Cameron was saying everyone is saying SA is evolving for the next World Cup. Newsflash, so is every other country. Grant saying if the All Blacks win, then when you start a campaign to bring back Leon McDonald. Cameron saying Leon McDonald, ego got the better of him, that's why he left. He couldn't take orders. If he wants to be head coach, he shouldn't have taken the job and wasted Razor's time. Imposter says the only issue is lock, no Clay, Snyman, Mostert, Luert, Nokia wouldn't be touching a Springbok jersey if these guys were there, which I think is a nice sort of position to be in to a certain degree, in that you've got a player like Ruudz Nokia who's had such a good season, and he probably wouldn't have been playing much if everybody was fit. Eric's saying a lot could depend on how they counter your umbrella defense and how you adapt to it. And then Dylan saying, I think we're going to see the best running rugby from both sides this weekend. I predict a high score. Well, that's a nice way to sort of bring in the team that the Boks have selected, because I think it is a very attacking side. Ruudz, if you have a look at this team, I mean, a pretty tried and tested front row, a bit of an experimental second row, which is injury enforced. You then got Sia Khaleesi, Jasper Wiese, Ben Jason Dixon. That's a back row that really excites me. Very, very physical back row. Kubas Ranak partnering fine with Sasha Van Zulu, David Linda, Jesse Creel. Those two have been a credible centre pairing. But I think probably the most exciting part is probably this back three of Kurt Lance, Ches, and Colby. We know what we bring, but then Apele Fassi, who's a proper attacking threat. Does this team scream to you attack?
So the interesting part for me is obviously the experimental way they've gone in terms of the second row. For me, I was kind of wondering if Eben Etzebeth and this is in my own small mind, if he's fit to play and be ready, why did they have him start off the bench? But I think then again, that leads me to believe that Rassie is probably instructed one of the players, definitely in that first half, to empty out their tank, be it Ben Jason Dixon or Ron Nakia, because we're going to see the introduction of Eben Etzebeth. And I think the most interesting part of this clash is obviously two differing styles, but then again, South Africa are definitely going to do the grunt work in that first half, and that's where I allude to emptying the tank. And then we have obviously the bench with the 6-2 split coming on. And I think from the 60th minute onwards, in my prediction, we're just going to pull away from the All Blacks. I don't necessarily say it's going to be a massive deficit, but I just think that grunt work and someone emptying out the tank in that first half, be it, like I said, Ben Jason Dixon or the likes of Jasper Wiese, going hard, going thick on the paint. And then obviously that back three can do the business in the second half when the All Blacks are actually out on their feet.
Yeah, look, I mean, in terms of a bomb squad, adding Etzebeth to it is a pretty big move, pretty bold move as well. I mean, you look at the players there, and I mean, it's impact on impact on impact, really. Dan, we spoke a little bit about on our podcast, and if you haven't, go and check out Between Two Fans. But I mean, you look at this bench, for example, Grant Williams, Kwagga Smith, Malcolm Marx. These are players who bring on so much when they do come on. I mean, just is this one of those points of difference that make this Boks team so special, that you can bring on players like those guys, that kind of caliber? I don't think there's any other team in the world that can kind of bring on your Malcolm Marx type of Kwagga Smith that can bring the kind of impact that they do.
Yeah, I think that's become synonymous with the Boks success is, the coining of the term, the bomb squad, and how you can redefine your bench. For example, many would regard Malcolm Marx as South Africa's best hooker, but he's almost exclusively wearing the number 16 jersey. And, the Bok camp would never, say that, anyone is better than the other, because I think they've built an environment where it matters much less that you are on the bench than starting because of the importance that you can bring. I mean, the likes of Kwagga Smith will go down in rugby history as the best substitute player to probably ever don, a international shirt, because of the way that we're able to bring them into the game. And it's got to a point where for smaller countries, it's tougher because of the impact that is now brought in. It's not the lesser players that are held back for a time, and just to go do the exact same job that the others were doing. It's very well thought through, and that goes into also what type of bench we're picking. Is a one scrum off and who can cover a lot of backline positions, is that okay? Can we just dominate the forwards and that's enough? It's not just filling in one per position, which I guess was a very, if we're thinking back on it, quite a rudimentary way of considering how to use a bench.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, actually. And I think especially with the smaller nations, and this is where it's kind of been the hallmark. We talked about the sort of South African depth, and I think this has been the first coaching staff to really tap into that in terms of saying, well, let's not make this a 15-man game. Let's make it a 23-man game. We're going to use our bench in such a way that's a whole separate weapon, and not about, well, can our bench just continue to pick up where they left off? No, they actually bring a whole new dimension to the game. Let's have a look at New Zealand. They've named their side. And it's a pretty straightforward side. No, Ethan de Groot's a big loss for them. Picked up that late injury and so hasn't traveled as a result. Tamati Williams gets an opportunity. Very big lad. And we'll add a lot of bulk to that All Blacks pack. Now, no Dalton Papali'i. He's out with an injury and is not in 23. Ethan Blackhead has been very impressive. Sam Cane gets his first start since the World Cup final. They continue with the Perinoa-McKenzie combination, which got a bit of criticism in that first game against Argentina and then bounced back pretty well a week later. And then a very big call as well, Mark Telea, and in fact dropped down to the bench with Caleb Clark starting. So Carl, when you look at that All Black side, I mean, as I said, it's an expected side. Plenty of quality here. But it's difficult to really know what to expect, isn't it, from them in terms of two maybe sort of rusty performances almost looked like it, or disjointed against England. Then a poor performance against Argentina. I mean, a pretty decent performance against Fiji. But then I think that last performance against Argentina was probably the first time we've sat up and said, oh, have they actually arrived?
Yeah, that's the problem with New Zealand. Like they're like on their bench, they've got Sam Darrett, who's had a pretty good entrance into international rugby. And their bench is good. And actually talking about Dan's point of marks and having that kind of benefit off the bench. And I was just thinking that there are very few teams in the world that have two of the best in the same position to have that luxury. Yeah. I mean, even New Zealand don't do it. And I think Almur is a class player, but he does not have the same kind of, I'm just going to be a limpet on your ruck ball whenever you're in a dangerous position. And I think that's also coupled with South Africa is very good at having one of their best player in that position as captain as well. A lot of teams will choose an experienced guy to be their captain who's not necessarily the best player. And that actually causes them a lot of problems because, yes, your experience and your leadership is great, but you lose the effectiveness of that player.
It was an interesting point because that was the criticism towards Sam Cane a year ago. People talking about the fact, should he be starting? Is he the best player in his position? Which he took very personally and decided to rock up during the playoffs and put in some proper Sam Cane performances. But it's an interesting point in terms of making sure that player is the captain, which is why I think a lot of people assumed that Ardie Savea was going to be wearing the armband.
Yeah, I think, and I would say he would be a better choice than Scott Barrett. Scott Barrett is, as we know, is a habit of getting himself cards, although he's been all right so far. But it's a good
Maybe
team.
That's the only way to stop him getting cards, make him captain.
Tell him he's fired if he gets one. But there are, I mean, their backline doesn't have the same versatility yours does. It does in a way, but their wingers aren't so much. Like, okay, yes, Will Jordan can play at fullback quite easily, but Caleb Clark not so much. And I wouldn't put Caleb Clark anywhere else. I don't know. Like the fact that Talia's there is an interesting one for me. I probably would have said Talia over Clark, but Clark has been playing well.
Agreed.
And I thought, even though I think he scored a try or two against Argentina, I thought Talia did have a dip against them. I thought he wasn't on his best form. It's interesting. Like I do like their forwards. Although I'd probably start. I probably wouldn't have gone Sam Cane. I
think Sam Cane's there for the emotional driver. I think he's there. Seriously though, like he played his last game. Like pretty much, he played his last game at Eden Park. Probably going to be, I mean, he says this last time he's ever going to play at Ellis Park. He speaks about how he wasn't sure if he was going to ever don the All Black jersey again after what happened at the World Cup. And as far as like blunders go, it's about as big as it gets, right? You're the captain of a team and you get sent off in the first half due to a red card after a high tackle. Now you're playing that country again after you thought maybe your career was done. This is complete redemption for him, as much as he might say it's not. Like, I think the emotional place he's going to go to. And we saw what happened when he turned things around after everyone was starting in the group stages of the Rugby World Cup and what he did against Ireland. I think we're going to see the exact same performance of him.
What do we think of Rico coming back into the team?
So my wild opinion is I still think that Antonina Brown should be at 13. I mean, Rico Ioane, I know, has had a couple of great seasons at 13, and it took him a while to adapt there. I think Antonina Brown starts at 13. I get more nervous looking at the back line than I do at Rico Ioane. I think there's far more to Antonina Brown's game than there is to Rico Ioane's.
I think, yes, Rico had some great seasons, but I think New Zealand shot themselves in the foot when they took him away from wing. He was so good at wing, like nuts. I would pick him at wing over Talia. He was that good.
I think he would have broken the New Zealand try scoring record quite easily.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people think he's world class, and he arguably is. I don't find Geordie Barrett that impressive. Not anymore. He certainly had some very good seasons, but
What's interesting about the backline, like with Barrett and even Ioane, and their modern backline is almost to an extent they were kind of fitting people. It was like, we just need to get the best players on the field, and we need to make sure.
Because I think the biggest problem as well is they didn't have an inside center for a long time. They had a couple of other options, and so then they moved Jory, who's playing a lot of fullback, into inside center, which I do think if he had actually moved there a bit earlier in his career, I think inside center makes so much sense for him. But I must admit, I don't look at the center pairing necessarily, and it strikes fear into my. I look at his backline and I worry about Damian McKenzie and the type of game that he decides to have, because on this day you can do so much. Will Jordan, don't give him an inch, because we all know how devastating he is. And I think Beauden Barrett brings so much calmness and to the side.
Yeah.
My biggest thing, and Ruudz, with those to you, I look at this bench as a Bok fan, and there's no one on this bench which makes me nervous. Maybe Martelea at a push, but you don't really get that nervous from a wing coming off a bench.
You just said Alan Brown should be starting, Stevie.
Yeah, no, I think he makes him a better side, but I don't think he when he comes on, I don't think he brings in the same impact that a Kwagga Smith's going to bring on, a Malcolm Marx, a Grant Williams, for example.
He's a starter, not a finisher.
Yeah, I think he. I don't think Jesse Creel will be a fantastic impact player, for example.
Yeah.
That being said, Jesse Creel is probably the Bok player I'm most impressed with over the last year and a half.
Jesse Creel, the great. But Ruudz, talk us through this New Zealand backline. I mean, the bench.
So just touching on the New Zealand side and the bench, you've got the likes of Sam Derry, who seems to have had a good start to his Test career. Mm-hmm. But then you just look at the flip side for South Africa now, having the luxury of Eben Etzebeth, and if you had to put them two in a UFC or a boxing ring, a UFC octagon or boxing ring, it's clear cut who'll go out and win that one. I think for the All Blacks, and I know there's a lot of subtle nuances to a rugby game, especially a big Test match like this. The All Blacks want to dictate the game on their own terms, and just judging by the split that they've gone with, they want to run us off our feet, as they would say, and really play the game at pace. I think the crucial part for us is to obviously slow the game down, rush hard on defense, and then just get those big, doughy-eyed All Blacks shell-shocked. Because once the All Blacks are rocked, I think history has proven that they find it hard to really gain any traction. So for the bench, they've got Finau that can come on and is a big unit. But I think the likes of Kwagga Smith, albeit he's not the biggest in terms of stature, we've got players that can really come off the bench, and just if we can just maintain the intensity, obviously start with intensity and maintain it off the bench, I don't think the All Blacks can match us. But then it goes with that simplicity of making sure we can dictate the game on our own terms. I know the All Blacks could potentially match us in terms of the scrum set piece, and at line out it's going to be interesting with Nokia starting, but I don't think the All Blacks will dominate us at scrum time. So for us, just being able to do what we do best, and then the intensity on defense must be there. But obviously the All Blacks are very tactical in putting the ball in behind, for example. So just awareness from that back three to absorb that and really just keep the pressure on, because if we have to do a like-for-like bench comparison, I think South Africa, if we can maintain that intensity in the first half, bring on that bench and just keep that work ethic, I think the All Blacks will be swallowed up.
I tend to agree. Right, so this is not the only Rugby Championship game happening this weekend, and so we can have a look at what's happening with the Argentina versus Australia. Now, Argentina have named their side pretty standard, not too many changes there from them. But it's been an interesting tour, that because you've got a Australian side which is coming from a very low base, and probably kind of Australian rugby itself, and it's arguably the worst state it's ever been in. I think they've got the right person in charge in Joe Schmidt, but I mean, every single time they're naming a side, there's debuts, there's new players, there's players who haven't played at this level, then they're losing players to, NRL and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a shit show. Dan, as Argentina, who also got a new coach, to be fair, but having beaten the All Blacks and had, a bit of a shaky start against France, surely they're looking at 2 home games against Australia going, these are these have to be 2 wins.
Sorry, Steve, just to jump in there. This is a Tier 2 Rugby Championship game you're talking about, eh?
A semi-finalist there, bro. I was going to say, I think Argentina coming back off the World Cup, they're supposedly, based off of that, the 4th best team in the world. Then you did go and see them lose to a 2nd/3rd string France team at home.
Yeah, so, a France barbarian side with players getting sent home every second day.
Yeah, no, let's not get into the legalities of that French team and the charges they have against them. But yeah, I think for them, they have to go in with the mindset of winning both, and Australia need to make sure that they aren't able to. It's kind of that's going to be the tussle, because I think for Argentina, it's like they've always had the performance in them. They've probably upset. I think they've probably won against every single nation right now at this point, right? So they know that they have it over the years, and we see them do well at so many World Cups. They've made so many semi-finals, but it's literally just for them about stringing those together now. Can you get there week in, week out? And if you can, first game win versus Australia will be big, but then they'll want to, prove that them letting it slide against the All Blacks in that second game wasn't just a pattern now that's forming of them, winning the first, losing the second. I think they'll desperately want to go back to back. And to be honest, I think they should. I genuinely think they should, because I don't think this Australia team is particularly good.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I think if things get right, I think it could get messy. I think the biggest thing with Argentina is just, as you mentioned, they just lack the consistency. There's on the day they can be a top. I mean, they've beaten the All Blacks away twice now in the last few years. They've beaten South Africa at home. They're a side that on their day could go toe-to with the best team in the world, and yet they're never considered a top 4, top 5 side because of that lack of consistency. Carl, do you think this is going to be hopefully the hallmark of the Contepone era? Turn them into a side which can consistently be top 4, top 5 in the world, and when there is the expectation for them to win, can deliver on that expectation, and not just a side who are incredibly difficult to beat at home and then rock up during World Cups and put in a couple of inspirational performances.
Have you got the team sheet there?
For Argentina, I can show you. Australia have not named it theirs, but this is how Argentina line up.
Well, Australia is still trying to get the numbers.
Yeah, they're probably still flying.
Professional rugby players.
Let's have a look. Molina, Rubiolo. It's a good side.
Good live analysis is coming to you.
Hey?
I do like
live analysis coming here. Yeah.
Go down to 15.
It's Cruz Malia. Come on, it's there. It's there. We all know he's a 50. I don't think they've had a different 15 in the last 3 years.
No, it's a good side. I think where most of their issues actually come from is Carreras at 10. Not because he's a bad player, but because he is erratic. He is either on or off, and when he's on, he is world class. But when he goes, the whole team follows. Unfortunately,
Nicolas Sanchez and that great the great mullet he had at the World Cup has officially hung the boots up. So this is the Carreras era. He's an interesting player because he was kind of just put there basically. I mean, he played mostly at fullback before. They decided, listen, I know you're a fullback, but how about you play 10 at the international level and just become a 10 by playing here for the Rugby Championship? So always felt sorry for him in that he had to learn how to become a flower half on the international stage, which is quite a wild thing to do.
That's been a frequent problem with Argentina, though. I remember there was one year where they debuted 4 fly halves in 1 year.
Yeah.
And then they still didn't stick with any of them. Like, they have a distinct problem with fly half.
Contepone could just put himself on if he's having a couple of issues. I reckon he can still do a job there.
Just start Contepone with Sanchez on the bench for the next 20 years. Just do it. Just roll the years back and do it all again. I mean, if Augustin Creevy can still play and he's on the bench, then come on, Felipe's napping out here.
Yeah. I think if Australia don't get 2 posts starting, their scrum's going to get absolutely destroyed. Like, I love the Argentinian scrum. It's so good.
What was good to see was that the Argentina scrum was so good coming off the bench against New Zealand, especially in that first test where Augustin Creevy came on, scored try. I mean, was rolling back the years. Argentina, everybody loves watching Argentina. I love the centre pairing. I think Chukabara is a really good player. I think he's going to have a fantastic career. Very, very cool young player. I think it's just the consistency. I think I do agree. When Carreras is on, then he makes things happen. You can understand why they're trying to get him to work because he is a creative mind. He's very attacking natured, and Argentina are always that kind of crazy streets won't forget type of team with the type of tries they score. I mean, some of the tries that Mateo Carreras is scoring against the All Blacks, I mean, they're just wild.
Mateo Carreras is the most dangerous.
The maverick fly half. He's not really a fly half. It's like the most Argentina situation ever. Like, you're not really a fly half, but just go out there and just cook. Just do some cool shit and see if it works. Which is kind of how I feel Argentina basically kind of just play. They're just like, oh, well, we'll just bring some South American flair to the table.
Australia also are struggling at 10. They haven't really been able to nail that spot down for a couple of years now.
Well, it doesn't help that they thought that they had the Messiah and Carter Gordon, who then said, "Thanks, I'm off to league."
Yeah, and the sad thing is, Lolosio is amazing at club level, but he's never been that good at international. He's kind of been a stopgap for them for a bit too long.
To be fair, I think Eddie Jones has genuinely put that Australian side back a few years, several years.
Yeah,
100%. He backed Lolosio all the time, and then went to the World Cup without him basically, and said to Carter Gordon, "Cool, just start." I haven't backed you at all. He was just some of the decisions he made were absolutely. I mean, it was a proper tank job. We don't have the Australian side. Hopefully, it should be announced almost any minute now. Actually, we're gonna have a look at the Currie Cup in the last sort of closing stages over here because it's been such a cool competition. Me and Dan every week we just rave about how much fun it is. Just silly tries, incredible. Wild moments. We haven't had too many big upsets yet. We've yet to see the Griffins go and beat a top side, but it has been very cool. I'm actually going tomorrow to there's Lions versus Bulls, which is on the table. I am going. I have decided I'm going to make the trek in between going to All Blacks training and interviewing Scott Baird and the likes. So that's how the Currie Cup log currently looks like. So the top of the table clash tomorrow with the Bulls taking on the Lions. What's very cool about this is actually happening at a school in Pretoria because Loftus is being used for a concert, and it's happening at Midstream College, which I think is got a capacity about 2,000 people, maybe 3 if they push. But I think that's something that we need to see a bit more in the Currie Cup is those community stadiums being used. I know Stormers have played a couple in the Donny Craven, for example, which I don't know why. If you've got Stellenbosch University right there, I would just basically base the Currie Cup team at the Donny Craven. You would fill that stadium up every weekend just from the students. Similarly for the Lions, just go and base it at Wits and UJ and just bring the students in. Same as the Bulls. Go play at Tuks. Just go take it to the university stadiums and you'll be sorted. But Ruudz, unfortunately, no EP Kings just yet on that table. So no local team for you. But the Currie Cup maybe might not be what it used to be in terms of the prestige, but it's just still such a cool competition, isn't it?
Absolutely. Just touching quickly on the Australia team. They play rugby at the moment like they were breakdancing at the Olympics, to be honest with you.
Ray guns. Ray
guns. Really cruel.
I would start at 10.
I think to be honest with you, the Griffins would give the Wallabies a good go at the moment. And also, I think just to touch lastly on Australia, and there's obviously a lot of debate around it when the Wallabies and the Springboks played the second test. When I saw the Wallabies cop out of that scrum in the second half, you kind of get the feeling that they just don't want to really put any intensity or focus on their set piece, and that's where they really are battling, to be honest with you. But coming back to the Currie Cup, it's exciting to see a lot of youngsters that are coming through. I think with the South African teams moving up north, it's given a lot of opportunity to non-Springboks perhaps to really open up the player pool in terms of showing and showcasing what they can do. I mean, I look at the Lions, that Renzo Duplessis, the number 6 flank. I think in this last month, he's got 3 out of 4 man of the match awards. So it'll be interesting to see a player like that in a couple of years' time push on and go on for Springbok colours. So to see the Bulls, obviously my favourite team at the top of the table, up against the Lions tomorrow is going to be a really exciting one. And then hopefully the EP Kings on my 50th birthday would get back into the Currie Cup.
You know what, Ruudz? I'll fly down for that. Hey, EP Kings in the Currie Cup final. Ruudz turns 50. Everything down in Kabeja. Dan, we will have a bit of an Eastern and we'll have an Eastern Cape reunion.
I'll fly out for that.
There we go. There we go.
Right in there and straight to the front seat. Yeah. To be fair, it is such a bloody pity that South African rugby hasn't got a Eastern Cape franchise to really get off the ground. And EP Kings was their chance at that. But my word, they're missing out on a talent pool there.
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, if you've ever gone and watched schoolboy rugby in the Eastern Cape, it is stupidly good. Like, stupidly good. Hey, leave our boys alone. They're down in like third tier varsity rugby at the moment. It's tough. It's tough times. We're not gonna go down that route. But yeah, I mean, Dan, the Currie Cup, your Western Province are making a bit of a mockery of it. They're changing the name to Stormers, which is probably about right because this isn't the Western Province you can really be proud of. But I thought we'd actually talk about that fact. The bit of a name change. Now we've seen over here there are already branding changes. So for example, back in the day, you used to have the Blue Bulls, had a different logo, different kit. It was a whole different almost different franchise basically. It was a union as opposed to the franchise. Similarly, you used to have the Golden Lions, again different logo. Type of thing. Same thing. You used to Natal Sharks, etc. And now all these sort of these brands are kind of all aligning themselves with the modern era. And there is now talks, and there was at a press conference earlier this week, that the DHL Western Province, the West Province, might be no longer, and we're going to see a Stormers in the Currie Cup. Bit of rugby heritage being lost there if we lose the hoops, Dan?
Yeah, no, the hoops absolutely must stay. Like, I understand. It's like, I do find it a little bit silly that the Stormers have like a different Instagram page, for example, and
website, and
because it's fundamentally the exact same franchise. Like, centralize that, like that is just a complete branding issue. But keep the nostalgia. People love the nostalgia. Keep the hoops, keep the badge. Like, even now, I'm shocked now that the Bulls don't have their typical Currie Cup badge. It's like, what? Like, that's the blue Bull
flower, didn't it?
Yeah, they have the red flower, and it's just, I think you can nostalgia or the old version, let's say, doesn't need to be something that's outdated. You can tap into that nostalgia factor, and we've seen even in certain South African derbies, they're tapping into, the schools they played for, wearing their socks and stuff like that. You can do the exact same thing with this and get people proud of that, background. We've seen now, sponsors are involved in names, like DHL Stormers. That's kind of whatever at this point, and it's necessary for investment, but you can still hold on to it and not just get rid of, something like the Stormers playing in hoops, because that is actually what every single Western Province fan or Stormers fan will associate to their kit.
Yeah, I think it should be compulsory that the Currie Cup is heritage, and you got to go back to that. So I think we need long sleeve cotton jerseys, those tiny shorts, and we need to go back to.
What? So when it rains, they weigh 100 kgs more.
Correct. And that's also a rule. We cannot play on green grass that's not wet. It needs to be muddy. Leather ball. We take the Currie Cup back to the roots, and we appreciate what rugby is. That's what it should be. A celebration of what rugby was.
One thing I do love, it hasn't been done for quite a while now, and don't get me wrong about the whole Twickenham thing, but one thing I used to love England doing was when they would have random games, they'd choose to go back to a kit they wore 70 years ago. I'm like, I want that. That's awesome. And losing that is the Province kit is one of my favorite kits in the Currie Cup. The Sharks is boring. I used to like it when the Sharks played in black and white, not just black. The Province kit's one of the nicest ones. They'd be sad if they lose that.
Yeah, I mean, it was used to always. I mean, as a youngster, I never really liked the Lions whites with the red stripe. The older I got, the more like you kind of appreciate the retro vibe. But it is quite sad, those sort of those old school jerseys and the old school sort of aspect of that. But I think the main thing is the fact that we still have the Currie Cup. As Ruudz said, this is the pathway for so many players. And it's given us so many players over the years. And it's good to see it still going. But sad that the Greeks have kind of and have fallen off a little bit this season. They've been such a cool team in the last couple of years. But I think it is good to see that we are seeing stronger sides being fielded by the Bulls, Lions, Sharks, Cheetahs, the Western Province. I mean, they're fielding decent side. They're just not getting the results. But it's nice because I feel like the Currie Cup now, compared to what it was a year or two ago, is definitely stronger. We're definitely seeing a better product. I mean, for example, and it's interesting how it's becoming part of the preseason. I mean, tomorrow, to the extent, Lions are not only named basically at URC side, but the actual URC management are even taking over tomorrow just for a select game. And they're basically treating it as a preseason game. And then they'll hand it back to sort of the Currie Cup management. So it's a very interesting sort of vibe that this competition is kind of become. But we're going to go into some predictions now, people, because we've got some very, very big calls to make, because we've got to try and call the big one, and we've got to try and call Argentina versus Australia. And before we do that, just going to get your final sort of thoughts on the Rugby Championship itself. One thing I want to speak about was the idea of moving it to earlier in the year. It has once again raised its head this week. I thought before we make the predictions, it'd be a nice idea to sort of chat a little about that. Ruudz, would you be a fan of the moving kind of to more sort of the Six Nation windows, or do you think it needs to stay where it is?
I think the current model is working for the players. Obviously, in terms of a global calendar, I think at some stage or another, we perhaps will see the stars align and us move towards that time of the year. But I think for the moment, the way things are, it's working for South Africa, especially with our move up north. We don't want to also, I'm not sure how it would work then in terms of our local competitions. Would it benefit the young and upcoming players to have more Springboks available? But for the most part, I do think let's not try and fix too much. It's working at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, and Dan, what do you reckon about the global calendar and the change?
I feel like the scheduling is always like just difficult and conflicting. Like we like it at this stage; it feels right, but it kind of used to fit more with when we were associated to the Southern Hemisphere club-wise. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind it seeing it early on. It's like, the counter argument is that it's in summer and that's not rugby season, but we always play Super Rugby at any point, in that kind of the Jan-February window. So,
yeah,
it
would be so weird seeing a Springbok game in February, though. It'd be wild.
It would be, because you also know, I don't know, it's like that grass is going to be dry. You're not seeing kind of the sludge. Maybe that helps us. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And it kind of just, in a way, it just conflicts with, South African sporting fixture where, typically cricket in the summer, rugby in the winter. But I mean, condensing that all could be make for a pretty crazy Jan, Feb, March.
Yeah, I think sorry, just touching on there, how would it then perhaps impact the end of year tours if we were to have a Rugby Championship in Feb?
Well, I think it'll be interesting because it almost becomes like it would almost be like the Boks season would start in the end of year tours. Like kind of that's because I mean with the Northern Hemisphere sides, they kind of have. I mean, from a year point of view, they go Six Nations outgoing tour. That kind of becomes the end of the season, and things start again. So I think that would also be very interesting because I mean, we always kind of looked at the end of year tour as the end of the season. End of the thing. It would be quite like a whole different sort of shift, a bit like the URC, I suppose, which kind of continues over Christmas, whereas traditionally we used to go around January to December. It was such an interesting dynamic, actually, when you think about now how the incoming series, like the start of our season, we always have that kind of that one match against Tier 2 nation where we sort of rotate. It would be a very interesting concept if we suddenly now had an end of year tour which is actually the beginning of the season, where that's all of a sudden where experimentation happens. Then you've got the Rugby Championship, what happens, and then you kind of finish off your international season with an outgoing tour, or an incoming tour rather for us. Yeah, I think it's going to be a while before we even see anything like that. But it is interesting as they talk about a global calendar, how this might all start to align.
It would certainly. I think it might help South Africa. Well, it might help the Southern Hemisphere teams in World Cup years, because that shortened Rugby Championship's a piss take. It's a bit
that three game.
It would sort that out.
Yeah.
Even if you only do it in that year, fine.
What will be interesting, obviously, is also those All Black tours that have been spoken about. Those sort of old school type of tours that's going to happen between the Boks and the All Blacks, where we go over and you play 3 tests, play against Super Rugby sides in between there and stuff like that.
Just like the Lions,
yeah. I can't wait. I'm definitely. Okay, we're going over, guys. We'll see. I'll see you guys in Auckland in like 4 years' time. We're going over for the All Black tour. I'm not waiting another 8 years for British and Irish Lions tour. No. That's
well, we have to go to Australia for the World Cup, so.
Yeah, okay. Let's start counting. Start counting the pennies, people. Well, maybe we can all bet the money on the score predictions we're about to make, and we can all get there. Right. I'm going to do 2 predictions. We're going to do Boks first. In fact, I'm going to ask everybody for their predictions. I want a Boks versus All Blacks prediction and Australia versus Argentina prediction from everybody. Simple. Boks by however many, Oz or Argentina by however many. You can go New Zealand by however many as well. I'm not sure you've been invited back to the show, but if you're willing to cut to burn bridges, then go for it. And we're going to throw it over to Carl first. Hit us up.
Right, I'll burn my bridge first. I think All Blacks by 2.
Yeah. This is why the Sharks.
Then again, I am always
crazy.
I'm always helping you out at this point.
Salty about that 2019 World Cup. These bloody England fans, they're the worst.
And then Argentina.
Are you still bitter about that last scrum in the semi-final, Cal?
No, actually, I'm not fucking surprised in the slightest. I was actually remarkably proud of that campaign, surprisingly. But I reckon Argentina I think it'll be closer than people think. I think Argentina by 3.
Yo, that's a bit cool, right, Dan?
Well, I went Boka by 2 in our predictions on the Between Two Fans podcast. And for Australia versus Argentina, where is the game, by the way? Not that makes a difference.
It's in Argentina. Exactly where I can find out.
I'm going to go Argentina by 8. I think
Argentina by 8.
Not a blowout, but enough that they don't have to stress too much.
Okay, Argentina by 8. Right, Ruudz, what do you got for us?
South Africa by 6 for sure. And then it's expected that Argentina must beat Australia in both test matches. So Argentina by 11. I think if Argentina don't win, they'll really feel aggrieved in terms of Australia coming to play there. Australia might be in a position where they could end up out of the top 10 in terms of the world rankings for the first time ever. I just don't know what it means for Argentina. Other than 2 victories against Australia, I think really they are expected to win. Australia in a very dire place.
Argentina could look at getting second in the Rugby Championship.
If Argentina go back-to-back, they could be in a running for first, actually.
True. Then it all comes down to us in Argentina.
And they've got a home game as well against us. So they dark horses out there.
I think Australia are going to win one of those 2 games.
So, South Africa by 6 and Argentina by 11.
Right, I like that. I think I said Boks by 7, if I'm not mistaken, Dan, in the podcast yesterday. So something along those lines. And I think Argentina I'm going to go by 13. I think this will be the big win. If they get a big win against Australia, I think they could get this weekend. I think Australia, a couple of injuries. I'm not sure who they're going to be able to get back. And I think it's Argentina's side first game at home in the Rugby Championship after a reasonable New Zealand tour. They'll want to respond. So I'm backing them to respond in a big way. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We are less than 48 hours. In fact, 48 hours time, we will know what the result is between the Boks and All Blacks, and hopefully it's an absolute all-timer. People, if you are watching, please do smash like on video. Please do subscribe to the channel. Content tomorrow will include captain's runs from both teams, the Springbok photo, as well as captain's press conferences. It is the Zondilistic and Sia Khaleesi show tomorrow afternoon. Always a fun press conference to watch. And then we'll be live on Saturday. In fact, we'll be live tomorrow. I believe Ruudz has the pleasure of taking you through a Bulls versus Lions. I'll be with you live for Springboks versus All Blacks. And then Kyle will be on the late night train with that Australia versus Argentina game. Dan, I think he's just watching football this weekend. I don't know what his chat is. Yeah.
I'm watching the Paralympics.
There we go. He's watching the Paralympics. Love the work. Love the work. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Enjoy the evening. And to everybody else, we'll see you guys all very soon.